Once again, thank you everyone for joining today's class. So I am Romana Diana Castillo, your online learning coordinator for today. And her class will be about the physiological and psychological development of the adolescent. Once again, I do hope that you are reading your modules and you already know the first module. Okay. So in today's class, we are going to talk about your development. So I am sure that most of you in this class are still in the adolescent stage. Okay. So you are not yet an adult, but you are in the process of being an adult. Okay. So the physiological development of the adolescent, puberty refers to the physiological changes involved in the sexual maturation of a child, as well as other body changes that may occur during this period of time. Adolescence refers to the stage from puberty to adulthood and includes the psychological experiences of the child during this period. So yes, we are not just going to talk about your physical changes, but also your psychological changes. So as human beings, of course, it's not just our own bodies that should actually change. Our psychological makeup also changes as we all grow up. So if your psychological uh, mental capability does not change, there might be a problem with you. Okay? So let's define what is adolescence. Adolescence is described as being the teenage years from 13 to 18 years. That is why we actually call it teenage years. You are in the middle of being a child, so you're not a child anymore, but you are not yet an adult. So you are in the middle of being a child and being an adult. You are still growing up. Okay? So, however, puberty decides the onset of adolescence. Therefore, adolescence occurs in some children as early as 9 years of age. During this period of time, the child has a great deal of concern over his or her body image, and any discrepancies in the child's eye, such as obesity, early or late maturation, etc., may be manifested through a variety of disorders. During this adolescence, there is a large degree of psychological growth as children make adjustments in their personality due to the rapid physical and sexual development, which are characteristic of this period of life. Adolescents face ongoing conflict and difficulty adapting to the sudden upsurge of sexual and aggressive drives. These changes cause unrest and confusion in the adolescents' inner selves and in the way they perceive the world. So, an example of this would be a girl would have an early menstruation or maybe a very late menstruation. So, for example, you have had that as early as 9 or 10 or as late as 15 or 16. So it depends on your body, how your body actually changes. So development is a lifelong affair, which does not stop when we reach adulthood. Okay? So try this thought experiment. Whatever your current age, imagine yourself 10 years from now. So imagine if you're already 17 or 18 and you're 20 plus. You can think about this. Will your life have progressed? Will you have attained any goals? What state will your body be in? And how will you feel about it? Where will you be living? Will your cognitive and occupational skills have improved and broadened or started to slow down? Do you anticipate changes in your financial status? Will you have gained or retained or replaced a partner? How will you adjust to new responsibilities at work and at home? Will your leisure activities differ? Will you have had children or seen existing children grow up and live home? Would you expect other people to regard and treat you differently from the ways they do now? What changes in the larger world, technological, political, economic, might affect you in a decade's time? So let's simplify this. That means as we all grow up, as long as we are alive, development will not stop. As long as you are alive and breathing, development will always be there. So, what is puberty? Puberty refers to the physiological changes that the adolescent undergoes in order to reach sexual maturity. It is best characterized as a gradual onset of mature reproductive hormonal activity triggered by the central nervous system, mainly the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus also controls our memories and also hormonal activities. Okay? Most people look at puberty in three distinct stages: real, the prepubescent, pubescent, and post-pubescent. The prepubescent stage includes the first evidence of sexual maturation, primary sexual characteristics, and terminates at the first appearance of pubic hair. During this stage, reproduction is virtually impossible. The post-pubescent stage is characterized by the deceleration of growth spurt, completion of both primary and sexual characteristics, and fertility is possible. An example for this was that most males actually grow late, unlike with females. So for those females, if you have noticed, those males who are actually smaller before, and then you meet them up again at the age of 16 or 17 years old, you would actually be surprised that they already grow taller than you. Okay? That's an example of growth spurt. The anatomical development of the adolescent. Adolescent growth first centers on the extremities, the legs and arms during the early stages of adolescence. Changes also occur in the facial configurations of both sexes. The lower portion of the head begins to grow because the chin lengthens and the nose grows in width and or length. Additional changes in the proportion of the face is accredited to changes in tissue distribution. Even though both sexes undergo this change, within females, a layer of subcutaneous fat develops, which causes the rounding and softening of contours of the face and body, whereas the male subcutaneous fat development is much less pronounced, but the development of muscles and bones in the face is clearly seen. This gives the males a leaner and more angular face than the females. So these are the changes you would have as you change into an adult. So for males first, your hair will grow on your face. So you would pretty much grow a mustache and a beard. So some males are actually more prone to having a lot of hair in their face. That is why if you're watching some movies, most males actually have to use a shaver and shave their cheeks, their mustaches, and even beards. Okay, and then your voice will get lower. Okay, it may also crack sometimes. So you actually have a deeper, males actually have a deeper voice box than males. And you would also notice that most males would have their voice box. Uh, you would actually see them better inside your on your throats, unlike with females. You may also grow hair on your chest, so that depends on your uh, physical makeup and also natural makeup. And then your lower parts will grow. With females, of course, you'll grow breasts. They may be big or small, and they may be two different sizes. The inner lips of your labia may change color or grow larger. You'll also start getting your yearly period or monthly period. Okay? You may also both can have pimples. You'll grow hair on your under your arms, and your sweat may smell bad. That's why you have to keep on cleaning yourself up as you grow up. You may want to shower more and use deodorant. And both of you will have pubic hair. You will grow hair on your arms and legs and may feel some pain there as you grow. So that's are the different things that may change on your body. So the onset of puberty and adolescence. Amazing as it may seem, sexual maturation is programmable for the primary sexual characteristics to begin their development. The pituitary gland must first release stimulating agents called gonadotropins into the bloodstream. Once they reach the testes in a male and ovaries in a female, a number of changes will occur. There are two gonadotropins. First is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These gonadotropins are present in the adolescent during childhood, but at levels too low for sexual maturation to begin. At the beginning of puberty, the pituitary releases increased amounts of gonadotropins, while the child is asleep and stops immediately after the child awakens. However, once the child enters the post-pubescent stage, gonadotropins are released both during sleep and during the day. In the ovaries, follicle-stimulating hormone is responsible for the development of the follicle, which contains a developing ovum or egg. Follicle-stimulating hormone also helps produce the female hormone estrogen within the follicle when it is stimulated by luteinizing hormone. In males, FSH incites the growth of seminiferous tubules, which produce sperm in the testes. Luteinizing hormone is responsible for producing androgen male hormone in the Leydig cells. The androgen that the Leydig cells produce aids in the growth on the seminiferous tubules. As the adolescent grows older, the pituitary releases increased amounts of gonadotropins. Ovaries and testes grow more rapidly and produce larger amounts of estrogen and or androgen. Okay? Amazing as it may seem, sexual maturation is programmable for the primary sexual characteristics to begin their development. The pituitary gland was first released stimulating agents called gonadotropins into the bloodstream. Once they reach the testes in the male and the ovaries in the female, a number of changes will occur. There are two gonadotropins, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These gonadotropins are present in the adolescent during childhood, but at levels too low for sexual maturation to begin. At the beginning of puberty, the pituitary releases increased amounts of gonadotropins while the child is asleep and stops immediately after the child awakens. However, once the child enters the post-pubescent stage, gonadotropins are released both during sleep and during the day. Okay? In males, FSH incites the growth of seminiferous tubules, which produce sperm in the testes. Luteinizing hormone is responsible for producing androgen male hormone in the Leydig cells. Then, sexual maturation in the male adolescent. First, the testes and scrotum begin to increase in size. Pubic hair begins to appear. So those we are now going to talk about your changes as you grow up. Okay, so your lower sex begins to enlarge and adolescent growth spurt begins. The larynx starts to grow and the voice deepens. Hair growth begins on the upper lip. Nocturnal emissions may occur as sperm production increases. Pubic hair becomes pigmented and growth spurt reaches its peak. The prostrate gland enlarges. Hair growth begins in the axillaries, or what we say as armpits. Sperm production becomes sufficient for fertility and the growth rate decreases. So that means with this sexual maturation, you already know that you have to be very careful on your actions towards your opposite sex. And lastly, physical strength is at its peak. Now let's talk about physical changes on the female adolescent. The adolescent growth spurt begins. Non-pigmented pubic hair appears. The budding stage of development or breast elevation and the rounding of the hip begins, accompanied by the beginning of downy axillary hair. The uterus, vaginal labia, and clitoris increase in size. Pubic hair growth becomes rapid and is slightly pigmented. Breast development advances, nipple pigmentation begins, and the areola increases in size. Axillary hair becomes slightly pigmented. Growth spurt reaches its peak and then declines. Menarche occurs, or what we say as your first mens. Pubic hair development is completed, followed by mature breast development and completion of axillary hair development. And lastly, adolescent sterility ends and the girl becomes capable of conception, or what we say as you can already be pregnant anytime. So let's talk about menstruation. The menstrual cycle is controlled by the hypothalamus, which acts as a menstrual clock. The clock operates through the pituitary gland located at the base of the brain. The pituitary gland cyclically secretes two hormones, which directly stimulate the ovary. These hormones are follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormones. As follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormones act on the follicle, its cells multiply, causing a large fluid-filled cavity to form. The growth and activity of the follicular cells results in the secretion of estrogen by the cells, and this hormone is found in the fluid of the follicle. Menstruation occurs approximately every 3 to 4 weeks, so that's the normal menstruation. Others would have uh, an irregular menstruation if the ovum is not fertilized. Most of the lining of the uterus, mixed with blood, is expelled through the cervix into the vagina. This bloody discharge is referred to as menstruation or menses, or a menstrual period. The entire cycle repeats itself with regularity throughout the reproductive life of the female. However, at its onset after puberty, menstruation may be irregular for up to a year or two. Okay? The psychological development of the adolescent. Adolescent maturation is a personal phase of development where children have to establish their own beliefs, values, and what they want to accomplish out of life. Because adolescents constantly and realistically appraise themselves, they are often characterized as being extremely self conscious. Most especially, you are now experiencing changes throughout your body. You are not a child anymore at this stage. Your parents would definitely tell you to be very careful of yourself, most especially when you are in school and also interacting with the opposite sex. However, the self evaluation process leads to the beginning of long range goal setting, emotional and social independence, and the making of a mature adult. Okay? So during early adolescence, ages 11 to 13, development usually centers around developing a new self image due to their physiological changes. Adolescents need to make use of their newly acquired skills of logical thinking and ability to make judgments rationally. When they reach the ages of 14 and 15, the period known as mid adolescence, adolescents strive to loosen their ties to their parents, and their emotions and intellectual capacities increase. The adolescent becomes adventuresome and experiments with different ideas. This plays an important role in finding one's relations to oneself, groups, and post sex. During this time, the adolescent battles over his own set of values versus the set established by parents and other adult figures. The adolescent also begins to take on more control of educational and vocational pursuits and advantages. It is during this time that adolescents' self-dependence and a sense of responsibility become apparent along with their quest to contribute to society and find their place in it. During late adolescence, ages range from 16 on, adolescents have a more stable sense of their identity and place in society. At this stage in life, they should feel psychologically integrated and should have a fairly consistent view of the outside world. Adolescents should, by this time, have established a balance between their aspirations, fantasies, and reality. In order for them to achieve this balance, they should be displaying concern for others through giving and caring instead of the earlier childhood pattern of self-gratification. Okay? When we say self-gratification, we mean the act of pleasing or satisfying oneself, especially the gratifying of one's own impulses, needs, or desires. Of course, when you are a child, that's what you mostly wanted with your parents. Okay? So if you are already 16 on, you know that you must stop having this pattern of self-gratification. So at the conclusion of late adolescence, they should have had decided or discovered their role in society, have set a realistic goal in life, or what we say as you must have at least a dream of what you wanted in the future when you are already an adult, most especially when you are already 16 on. Your parents are already asking you what you want to be in the future and then what course you would take on college and etc. And you will have begun in earnest to achieve your dreams at this stage on. Okay? So using developmental psychology to understand the adolescents. So we do have John Piaget. John Piaget dedicated most of his life's work to understanding how children develop intellectually. His work on cognitive development is the most complete theory available today and is widely used. According to Piagetian theory, children progress through 4 stages in their cognitive development. Ceremotor, birth to 2 years of age, pre-operational, 2 to 7 years of age, concrete operational, 7 to 11 years of age, and formal operational, 11 to 15 years of age. Each of these stages represent a qualitative leap forward in the child's ability to solve problems and reason logically. As children enter adolescence, their cognitive abilities lie somewhere between Piaget's 3rd stage of cognitive development, the period of concrete operational, and the 4th or last stage, formal operational. During the concrete operational stage, children begin to understand the concept of conservation. Okay? So this is Jean Piaget's sensory motor differentiates self from objects, recognizes self as agent of action, and begins to act intentionally. Example, pulls a string to set mobile in motion or shakes a rattle to make a noise, achieves object permanence, realizes that things continue to exist even when no longer present to the sense. And then pre-operational learns to use language and to represent objects by images and words. Thinking is still egocentric, has difficulty taking the viewpoint of others, classifies objects by a single feature, example, groups together all red blocks regardless of shape or all the square blocks regardless of color. So language actually exists, and the baby actually gets the language from their parents at these two stages, sensory motor and also pre-operational. So if you are, for example, first language and a second language speaker, then definitely it actually develops at this stage. So if you wanted to actually get, or the parents actually wanted the child to have at least another language, a third language, for example, it will be way easier for the children to learn at this stage. Okay? Then we do have concrete operational, can think logically about objects and events, achieves conservation of number, mass, and weight, classifies objects according to several features, and can order them in series along a single dimension, such as size. And then formal operational can think logically about abstract propositions and test hypotheses systematically, becomes concerned with hypothetical, the future, and ideological problems. Then we do have Erickson's psychosocial stages. So stage 1, infancy, 0 to 1 year, basic conflict, trust versus mistrust. Virtue is hope, description, trust or mistrust, that basic needs such as nourishment and affection will be met. Then early childhood, 1 to 3 years, autonomy versus shame or doubt, virtue, will. So at this stage, a child would have to develop a sense of independence in many tasks. Then play age, so that's 3 to 6 years, initiative versus guilt. Then the virtue is purpose or finding your purpose. Description, take initiative on some activities, may develop guilt when unsuccessful or boundaries overstep. Then 7 to 11 years, of course, that's when you go to school already. So academic years actually starts here most of the time when you enter school at the age of 3 to 6. The school actually just allows children to play, especially in daycare centers. But then, when you are already 7 to 11 years of age, you now begin your academic lessons. So basic conflict, industry versus inferiority, virtue, competence, description, develop self-confidence in abilities when competent or sense of inferiority when not. Then, adolescence, 12 to 18 years. So now that you are an adolescent, you are now trying to find your identity, or you are still very much confused. That's why we say identity versus confusion. And virtue is fidelity, So when we say fidelity, faithfulness to a person, cause, or belief demonstrated by continuing loyalty and support. And description, experiment with and develop identity and rules. And when you start your early childhood, like early adulthood, 19 to 29 years, you are looking for your intimacy versus isolation. So you're looking for love at this stage now. And at this stage, you would have to establish at least intimacy and relationship with others. It doesn't mean you would have to look for family immediately. It can just mean your relationship with your parents, your sisters, your brothers, and friendship as well. Okay? Then middle age, 30 to 64 years, generativity versus stagnation, care. So you're looking for to contribute to society and be part of a family. And then old age, 65 onward, integrity versus despair, virtue, wisdom, assess and make sense of life, and meaning of contributions. And you're already looking if your life is actually successful to you. You're already reflecting most of the time at this stage. You're already asking, did I live very well from when I was a child until I reached that age? Then early adulthood versus late adulthood. With early adulthood, we do have typically spans from late teens or early 20s to around the mid to late 30s or early 40s, generally marked by peak physical fitness, strength, and reproductive capability. This is when individuals reach their physical prime. Cognitive abilities continue to develop with improvements in problem solving, decision making, and abstract thinking. This is a period of higher learning and career development. Focus is often on forming intimate relationships, starting families, and establishing careers. Emotional stability and independence are emphasized. Focus is often on forming intimate relationships, starting families, and establishing careers. Emotional stability and independence are emphasized. Individuals typically take on roles such as student, employee, partner, and parent if they choose to have children. They are building the foundation for their adult lives. With late adulthood, begins around the mid 60s and continues into old age. Physical changes become more noticeable, such as a decline in muscle mass, bone density, and sensory abilities. Mobility and flexibility may decrease. Cognitive decline may begin, with some individuals experiencing memory loss and reduced processing speed. However, many older adults maintain their intellectual capabilities. Relationship may shift to a focus on family, grandchildren, and retirement. Emotional well-being can vary, with some individuals experiencing satisfaction and contentment, while others may face loneliness and loss. Many individuals transition into retirement and may have fewer day-to-day work-related responsibilities. They may take on roles as grandparents or caregivers for aging parents. Health issues may become more common and healthcare needs may increase. often requiring more frequent medical checkups and potential chronic disease management. Then, Kohlberg's theory of moral reasoning. Lawrence Kohlberg viewed development in terms of different levels of reasoning applied to choices people make in their lives. This type of moral reasoning occurs throughout a person's life and depends on an individual's social interaction. A person evolves from one level of reasoning to another as he or she is able to understand a higher level of reasoning and is able to experience in social interactions a conflict that im- impels them to accept the newer, higher level values. Kohlberg viewed moral reasoning in three levels, which included six sequential stages. Kohlberg perceived these stages as universal, that is, no stage is ever skipped and applicable to all cultures. Kohlberg stressed that the actual decisions people make are not important, but that the reasoning behind the decisions was important. This reasoning determines which stage of development a child is in. Unlike the other theories discussed above, Kohlberg's developmental levels and stages are not related to age. Developmental levels are determined by the dilemmas people face and the reasoning they apply in making decisions to resolve these dilemmas. The levels of development range from reasoning based upon self gratification, pre conventional morality, to reasoning based upon conformity, conventional morality, to reasoning based upon individual values that have been internalized, post conventional morality. As each level and its respective stages are discussed below, it is important to remember that adolescents will function at a level or stage more so than others. Determination of the stage at which an adolescent is functioning must be determined by observation and evaluation of the reasoning applied by the child to the dilemmas he or she faces. So this is Kohlberg's theory of moral development. So level 1, preconvention, younger than 6. Step 1, punishment and obedience orientation. Obey rules to avoid punishment. For example, you are being taught not to actually pee on your bed. So you'd be punished if you actually pee on your bed and you are already doing some kind of pot pot training. And after that, step 2, naive hedonism, conforms to get rewards and to have favors returned. Step 3, good boy or good girl morality, conforms to avoid disapproval or disliked by others. So that's already level 2, conventional level. Then step 4, conforms to avoid censure by authorities. So with 7 to 11 years, you are trying to establish friendships at this stage already, and you are already learning how to make friends. Then level 3, post-conventional, 11 years on. So step 5, conforms to maintain communities, emphasis on individual rights. And then step 6, individual principles of conscience. And that's all for today. Does anyone have any questions regarding today's lesson?